It may not be the highest mountain around, but is perhaps among the most recognizable mountains in Washington for its towering spires, mile-tall cliffs, and 3 distinctive peaks. 2 of these peaks, the smaller North and Middle peaks, are considered to be 2 of the most dangerous peaks to climb in Washington. This is because in addition to requiring mid to high 5th class climbing, Mount Index is known for thick vegetation, poor rock quality, and steep exposed dirt terrain. The highest of the 3 summits, South Index, has 3 main routes to the summit. Hourglass Gully utilizes the Lake Serene approach, a good option when logging roads accessing the other 2 routes are gated. This route, however, must descend 3 pitches of loose Class 4 and 5, where rockfall hazard is significant. To avoid this, one may consider the West Ridge, which requires a bushwhacking approach from deep in logging country, or the Persis Index Traverse, which also requires bushwhacking to a lesser degree, but is longer and more complicated. With the appeal of also summiting Persis, we chose the Persis Index Traverse. The real trailhead of this route begins at the end of a switchbacked logging road coming off of FS 6220. It is important to note that the logging road may be gated at Highway 2, increasing the round-trip distance by 12 miles. The gate may be open or locked, depending on the year. Luckily for us, the gate was open, and we were able to park a car just before the switchback, under 1 mile from the real trailhead. A bike came in handy, especially on the way down. The route begins first by ascending the Mount Persis Trail, which is easy to follow most of the way. Near the top, as snow coverage comes into play, the trail becomes more faint. But here the forest is more open and navigation to the top of Persis is straightforward. The next segment of the route is long and tedious. We camped at the top of Persis knowing a long day was ahead of us. From Persis, we descended a talus field accessed by Class 2 to 3 down scrambling to the right of the Persis Tarns. It is important to access this field in the right location, because too far left will cliff out in dense shrubbery. At the base of the talus field, we stayed approximately the same elevation, avoiding the cliffs lining the ridge and above the cliffs terminating the ravines below. Some bushwhacking is involved here, but in the early season, snow helped make travel easier through this section. Technically, there is a climber's trail that leads the whole way, but it is very faint, patchy, and when snow coverage is substantial, it's almost impossible to follow. Perhaps in the late season, the trail will become more obvious. After traversing the basin, we made a heading towards the obvious flat section below Persis Index, the peak located between Persis and Index. This required steep snow climbing in slushy conditions, although the run out was okay. The next segment from Persis Index to the saddle is the most challenging. Here we tried to stay as close to the ridge as we could, dropping south when the rock pinnacles blocked us from making a direct traverse. The brush is very dense here, and travel is slow. Just below the ridge to the south, the terrain becomes much steeper, with dirt slopes approaching 60 degrees between cliff bands. Just to the north of the ridge is a cliff that drops hundreds of feet. Towards the saddle, we dropped to the north, down 40-degree snow slopes to traverse around the sub-peak terminating the ridge, and then ascended through light bushwhacking and Class 2 to reach the west ridge of Mount Index. This ridge is very exposed with snow coverage. It is also the steepest part of the traverse, but luckily from here the bushwhacking is minimal. The terrain gets less steep as the route goes higher, until we finally reach the summit, where the exposure from being perched on a 5,000-foot cliff provides stellar views of the Skykomish Valley. The descent follows the exact same route as the ascent, and takes up about the same or slightly less time to complete due to the bushwhacking, ups and downs, and steep terrain. While the views are fantastic, this route would not be considered enjoyable by most. This is a route I can only recommend to those compelled to summit the mountain for peak bagging purposes. Ascending Persis is just as aesthetic, yet much more enjoyable. If you liked the video or found it useful, don't forget to subscribe for more mountain beta.